My name is Paula Grant, and I'm 28. People think betrayal always comes with a dramatic scene shouting, broken plates, some movie level confession in the rain. Mine came quietly. It came in the glow of a phone screen on my kitchen counter while the shower ran in the background like nothing in my life was falling apart. For almost 2 years, I thought I had the kind of relationship people envy. My boyfriend, Simon Hale, charming, funny, the kind of man who could talk to my coworkers for 5 minutes and make them feel like they'd known him for years. And my older sister, Marissa Grant, 31, the person who practically raised me in the emotional aftermath of our parents' divorce. She was my call at 2 a.m. person, my safety net, my proof that family could still mean something. Simon slid into our world like he belonged there. He laughed at Marissa's jokes. He remembered the little details she shared. He offered to help her when her marriage got rocky. And God, I was grateful. I thought it meant my life was stable, that the two people I loved most were on the same team. Then the weird little moment started. A perfume I didn't recognize on his shirt. His phone flipping face down the second I walked into a room. Marissa suddenly busy whenever I asked about her weekend. And Simon, who used to be predictable in the best way, started coming home late with stories that sounded too polished, like he'd rehearsed them in his car. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself it was stress. I told myself love meant trust. Until one night, I couldn't sleep. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at Simon's phone like it was something poisonous. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to know. But my hands moved anyway. And when I opened the messages, I didn't just see flirting. I saw a timeline. I saw my sister's name beside words that didn't belong to family. I saw I miss you. I saw yesterday was worth the risk. I saw proof that while I was making dinner, while I was asking Marissa if she was okay, while I was comforting Simon about her marriage, they were building something behind my back. And the worst part? They'd been planning to keep it going, right under my roof. Before everything broke, my life looked ordinary. In a good way. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized construction firm. Steady hours, decent pay, nothing glamorous but reliable. I liked knowing what my days would look like. After growing up in a house where emotions shifted without warning after my parents' divorce, predictability felt like safety. I met Simon Hale when I was 26 at a friend's backyard barbecue. He offered to help me carry drinks inside, made a joke about my terrible grip, and somehow stayed next to me the rest of the night without ever forcing it. He was warm in an easy way, not flashy, not intense, just present. We started dating a few weeks later, and within months, he felt woven into my routine: coffee runs, Sunday grocery shopping, lazy evenings on the couch. Family approval mattered to me more than I liked to admit, and Simon passed that test almost immediately. Especially with Marissa. Marissa is 3 years older than me, and for most of my life, she was the stable thing when nothing else was. When our parents split, she was the one who made sure I ate dinner, finished my homework, didn't feel like the world was ending every time our father didn't call when he said he would. I admired her. I trusted her. If Marissa said someone was good for me, I believed it. So when she smiled at Simon and said, "You're good for her," I felt like I'd won something. Marissa was married to Ethan, a nurse who worked long, unpredictable shifts. They'd been together since their early 20s, and from the outside, they looked solid. But about 8 months before everything exploded, cracks started showing. Missed dinners, short tempers, long silences that sat heavy in the room. Simon noticed. He always noticed. He'd ask how Marissa was doing. He'd suggest we invite her over when Ethan was working late. He said things like, "She shouldn't be alone right now," and I agreed. Of course I did. That was my sister. Around the same time, Simon changed jobs. His new schedule was more flexible, some early days, some late afternoons off. Marissa's schedule became strange too, partly because Ethan was picking up more night shifts. It made sense, at least on the surface, that they'd cross paths more often. "She helped me organize the garage," Simon would say casually. "Marissa stopped by to drop something off," he'd mention. "She's worried about Ethan," he told me once, his voice soft, concerned. I remember feeling grateful. Grateful that my partner cared about my family. Grateful that my sister had someone checking on her when I couldn't. Looking back, that gratitude was the perfect cover. There were tiny moments I ignored because they didn't fit the version of my life I wanted to believe in. Simon's phone buzzing during dinner. Him stepping into the hallway to answer. Marissa canceling plans last minute with vague excuses. The way they both seemed just a little too careful around each other when all three of us were in the same room. Nothing big enough to accuse, nothing concrete. And every time doubt tried to surface, I shut it down with logic. Simon isn't that kind of man. Marissa would never do that to me. You don't betray the people who saved you. I thought I knew who they were. What I didn't know was that while I was building a future in my head, holidays, shared keys, maybe marriage someday, they were quietly dismantling my trust piece by piece, convincing themselves it was temporary, complicated, understandable. And I was the only one in the dark. The shift didn't happen all at once. That's what makes betrayal so dangerous. It creeps in quietly, disguised as coincidence, concern, helpfulness. About 6 weeks before everything came apart, the atmosphere around me started to change in ways I couldn't quite name. Not dramatic enough to confront, just heavier. Like walking into a room where the air had been used up by something you couldn't see. Simon became harder to pin down. He'd leave for work at his usual time, but come home later than expected, offering explanations that sounded reasonable on their own. Traffic, a last-minute task, grabbing food with a coworker. When I asked questions, his answers were detailed, almost too detailed. He used to be casual, and now he narrated. Marissa changed too. She stopped venting the way she used to. When I asked how things were with Ethan, she'd shrug and say, "We're figuring it out," then change the subject. She used to call me after her shifts just to talk. Those calls slowed, then stopped. When I texted, her replies came hours later, polite, but distant. I told myself she was protecting me from her stress. Then there were the lies that didn't line up. Simon would say he'd helped Marissa with something that afternoon, but later I'd hear from her, casually, unintentionally, that she hadn't seen him that day. Or Marissa would mention running errands when Simon had told me she'd been at home all afternoon. Once or twice, I caught Simon closing apps on his phone when I walked into the room. He laughed it off, said he was planning something for my birthday. I wanted to believe him. I let myself relax into that explanation like it was a warm blanket. The first moment that really unsettled me happened on a Saturday afternoon. I stopped by Marissa's house unexpectedly to drop off some paperwork she'd asked for earlier in the week. Simon's car was in the driveway. My stomach dipped. When I knocked, it took a long time for the door to open. Too long. When Marissa finally answered, she looked flustered. Hair pulled back hastily, a smile that arrived a second too late. Simon appeared behind her, saying he'd just been helping her move some boxes. I remember standing there, forcing myself to smile, while my brain scrambled to make the scene make sense. It could make sense. That was the problem. Nothing was obviously wrong. Still, something lodged itself in my chest. After that, I started noticing how often Simon suggested we include Marissa in our plans, or how often he'd encourage me to stay late at work while he checked in on her. He framed it like concern, like kindness. And I believed him, because believing him meant my world stayed intact. Marking the change in myself came later. I started watching, listening more than talking. I noticed how Simon and Marissa avoided eye contact when Ethan was around, but exchanged quick glances when they thought no one was paying attention. I noticed the tension in their shoulders, the way conversations would pause when one of them entered a room. It felt like being the only person not in on a joke everyone else knew. The final red flag before everything broke was subtle but devastating. One night, Simon mentioned casually that Marissa had told him I'd been acting a little stressed lately, that she was worried about me. I hadn't told her that, and I hadn't been stressed, at least not until that moment. Something clicked then. Not clarity, not certainty, just a quiet realization that my name was being spoken in rooms I wasn't in, framed in ways I hadn't chosen. Whatever was happening, it wasn't innocent. And whatever truth was waiting for me, I was getting closer to it, whether I was ready or not. The night everything collapsed didn't look dramatic from the outside. No storm, no shouting, no warning. I got home close to 10 p.m. after a double shift. My body ached in that deep, hollow way that comes from being tired for too many days in a row. The apartment was dark except for the kitchen light, which Simon always left on when he was home. He wasn't there. That alone wasn't strange, but something about the silence felt wrong, heavy, like the space had been waiting. I texted him, "Where are you?" A minute passed, then 2. Finally, my phone buzzed. At Marissa's, helping her with something. "I'll be home soon." My thumb hovered over the screen. Helping her with what? At 10 at night? I didn't reply. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the door like it might explain things if I watched long enough. An hour passed. My phone buzzed again. "Traffic's bad. Don't wait up." I didn't sleep. The next morning, my sister Lena, Marissa's younger cousin, someone who floated in and out of our lives, called me while I was making coffee. We chatted idly until she mentioned, without thinking, that she hadn't seen Marissa in weeks because Marissa had been so busy lately. Busy, the word echoed. When Simon got home that afternoon, I watched him closely. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day, told me Marissa was hanging in there. His voice didn't shake, his hands didn't fidget. He was practiced. That night, while Simon was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Once, then again. I stood there longer than I want to admit, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself not to touch it. I told myself crossing that line meant admitting something was wrong. But the screen lit up again. Marissa. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I knew Simon's passcode. We'd never hidden things from each other. That trust, that was the cruelest part. The message thread opened to months of history. At first, it looked harmless. Did you eat today? Thanks for earlier. Hope you're okay. Then the tone shifted. I shouldn't have stayed that long. I hate lying to her. I miss you already. My chest tightened. I scrolled. Messages stacked on messages stretching back 2 months. There were references to afternoons I thought Simon was working late, to nights Marissa said she was exhausted, to moments that overlapped my own memories, now rewritten with meaning I hadn't been allowed to see. I can't stop thinking about yesterday. Worth the risk. She suspects nothing. That line shattered something inside me. I dropped the phone like it burned. The shower turned off. I barely had time to put the phone back before Simon stepped into the kitchen, towel around his waist, steam still clinging to his skin. I don't remember standing up. I just remember my voice sounding too calm when I said, "How long?" He froze. His eyes flicked to the counter, to the phone, back to me. "What are you talking about?" I laughed, a short, broken sound. "Don't." The color drained from his face. I asked again, "How long have you been sleeping with my sister?" He tried to deny it. Of course he did. He said I was misunderstanding, that it wasn't what it looked like. So I told him exactly what I'd seen. He sat down heavily, hands on his knees, like his body had finally given up the act. 2 months, he whispered. I thought I might throw up. I asked if it was still happening. He nodded. I asked if Marissa knew I loved him. He nodded again. I asked if they planned to tell me. He shook his head. That was the moment it became clear. They weren't sorry because they'd done it. They were sorry because I'd found out. I didn't know what to say at first. I stood there, staring at him in disbelief, as though the words wouldn't fit in my mouth. My heart was slamming in my chest, and every instinct told me to run, to escape, to make him feel the same crushing realization that was slowly squeezing the air out of me. But I stayed still. For what felt like an eternity, Simon didn't speak. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He was waiting for me to scream, to cry, to throw something, anything. I wasn't sure what he expected, but I didn't give him that. Instead, I took a breath. I can't believe you, I said quietly. I trusted you with everything. With my life, Simon. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. No excuses, no apologies, just silence. That was worse. It was like he didn't even know where to start. What could he say that would make any of this okay? What could he say to repair the mess he had made of our relationship, of my sister and I? I stepped back, my feet moving without permission. Every part of me felt like it was turning cold, hard, like I was trying to protect myself from the damage. But it didn't stop. I never meant for it to happen, he finally said, his voice hoarse. It just happened. It wasn't something I planned. It was a mistake. I looked at him, trying to process what I was hearing. It wasn't a mistake. A mistake was spilling coffee on the couch. This was deliberate. This was betrayal. There was no accidental spilling here. A mistake? I repeated, my voice stronger now, cutting through the suffocating quiet. You've been hiding it for months, lying to my face, and you still call it a mistake? What about Marissa? What was it for her? Was it a mistake for her too? He flinched at the mention of her name, but it didn't stop him from trying to justify his actions. Look, I didn't... He ran a hand through his hair, his face twisting. I didn't mean to hurt you. It wasn't supposed to go this far. She was there, you know? She needed someone to talk to. Needed someone to talk to. I stared at him, feeling the weight of the words. I couldn't believe it. She needed someone to talk to. So she went to my boyfriend? And then slept with him? And they both continued to lie to me like I wasn't even worth the truth? It felt like the ground was slipping beneath me. I shook my head. You both betrayed me. You're still trying to protect her, aren't you? After everything? He didn't answer. His silence said everything. He was still trying to justify what he did, But in the back of his mind, he was thinking about Marissa, about them, about the sick connection they'd built behind my back, the secret world that didn't even involve me. That was the worst part. "You don't get it, do you?" I asked him. "You don't get how much you've hurt me, how much you've destroyed everything. And you're not sorry for me. You're sorry for yourself." Simon looked down at his hands. His face, once full of charm and sweetness, now looked like it was melting into something I barely recognized. His features were sharp with guilt. But it wasn't guilt over the betrayal itself. It was guilt over the fact that I had caught them. "I never meant to hurt you," he said again, this time his voice cracking. "You never meant to hurt me?" I repeated, the anger rising in my chest, but it wasn't a scream, it was controlled. "You hurt me every single day you lied, every time you smiled at me, kissed me, held me, while behind my back, you were with her. You don't get to say that." Simon stood up now, trying to close the gap between us. His hands reached out, as though to touch my arm, but I stepped back quickly. "Please, just listen," he started. "No," I said firmly, cutting him off. "You don't get to talk to me right now. You don't get to say anything. I'm done." His face fell. "Paula, I don't want to hear it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't care why it happened. You betrayed me with my sister, and you lied to me. You ruined everything, Simon. I don't even know who you are anymore." My throat felt tight. The air felt thick, but I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was just done. And somehow that felt worse. It was the first time in my life that I had ever felt like I didn't know the person standing in front of me. The man who promised me forever. The man I had trusted. The man who was now nothing more than a stranger, who broke my heart and shattered the foundation of everything I had built with him. "I can't do this," I said quietly, stepping away from him. "I need you to leave. I need you to pack your things and leave my apartment. Now." He didn't move. "You don't get to stay here," I continued, the words coming out cold, clear, without hesitation. "Not anymore. Not after what you did." There was a long silence. Then he dropped his shoulders and nodded, defeated. I watched him, still standing in front of me, unable to look me in the eyes. "I'll go," he said quietly, turning away. I didn't watch him leave. I couldn't. I just stood there, my heart thudding in my chest, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Betrayal, confusion, heartache. How could he? How could both of them? But then something deep inside me clicked. I had to get through this. For me. For my future. And I had to do it without him. As he packed his things in silence, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let this break me. I wasn't going to let him break me. The next few days were a blur of quiet chaos. Simon left. His things disappeared from our apartment, the space he once occupied feeling hollow and cold. I couldn't bear to look at the empty shelves, the untouched couch where we'd spent countless nights talking, laughing, or just being. Every inch of the place felt like a reminder of what had been, what I thought we had, and what had been destroyed. But I didn't break down. I didn't fall apart, not in the way I thought I might. It was as if I had built a wall around the hurt, just enough to keep moving, just enough to survive the immediate aftermath. The hardest part came when my phone rang at odd hours, the screen lighting up with messages I couldn't ignore. Marissa. She wasn't calling to check on me. She wasn't asking how I was doing. No, she was angry. She was furious. She was entitled in a way I had never seen before. Her messages ranged from pleading for me to understand her side to accusing me of ruining everything she'd worked for. "You never supported me," she wrote one night. "You never cared that Simon was there for me when I was struggling with Ethan, and now you're turning your back on me, on family. You don't get to do that." I stared at her words, my hands shaking. Was she serious? Was she really blaming me for her actions? Did she not see that she had crossed a line no apology would ever erase? Did she not see how deeply she'd hurt me, how she'd let Simon's betrayal become her own? The more I read, the more my stomach churned. The woman I once called my sister, the one I trusted without question, was now twisting the narrative. She was making herself out to be the victim in a situation that she had created. Then the phone calls began. Carter, my brother. He hadn't been around much since Simon's betrayal. He'd seen what was happening, but I hadn't heard much from him. It was almost like he had chosen sides. But when he called me, his voice was thick with emotion, full of accusation. "What the hell, Paula?" His tone was sharp, angry. "You've really done it now. You've ruined everything. Simon has been trying to fix this, and now you're throwing it all away. I'm not saying what he did was okay, but you've cut him out of your life completely." I felt the walls I had been building start to crack. Not because I wanted to let him in, but because I needed to understand how far this was going to go. How many people would side with him? How many would side with her? I didn't ruin anything, Carter. They did. You have no idea what it's been like for me. How I've been lied to for months. How I've had to watch them both pretend to be my family while they were betraying me. And now you're blaming me. I heard his sigh, heavy and full of frustration. You don't get it, Paula. You're making this all worse. Marissa's not the only one who's been hurt. Simon is family too. He's your partner, your future. You can't just toss him out like this. My future. I blinked, my stomach dropping. Had Carter really just said that? Had he forgotten that Simon had made the choice to betray me? That my relationship, my future, had been the one he threw away when he chose my sister over me? This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. This was my family's attempt to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty for not accepting their lies, to make me feel like I was the one tearing everything apart. I could feel the anger building in my chest. The hurt wasn't going away. It was growing, sharpening with every conversation, with every text, every single attempt they made to shift the blame back onto me. Carter, I said slowly, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. I don't owe Simon anything. And I don't owe Marissa anything either. You should stop trying to defend them and start thinking about who's been hurt here. I am the one who's been betrayed. Not Simon. Not Marissa. Me. There was silence on the other end for a long moment. Then Carter sighed again, softer this time. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice quieter. I don't want to lose you too. But you're making it impossible for me to choose between you and Simon. It's not fair, Paula. That was it. That was when I knew. They had chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. I hung up the phone, but the calls kept coming. Not from Carter anymore, but from Simon, from Marissa, both of them, pushing, pulling, trying to break through my walls. Marissa sent me long messages about how hurt she was by my decision. She told me Simon was broken and that I had to be the one to fix him. She said I was making the wrong choice, splitting us up, as though it were my responsibility to heal the damage she had caused. And Simon didn't give up. His texts were full of apologies, promises, and pleas to meet, to talk. He swore he could make things right, that I could trust him again. He was so sure of himself, so sure that I would take him back, that I would forgive him, just as I always had before. But this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't something I could forgive. Not when everything had been built on lies. Not when I had been forced to watch the two people I trusted the most destroy everything we'd built, without even the courtesy of an apology. The pressure began to suffocate me. I knew I couldn't keep ignoring them, but I also knew I wasn't ready to forgive. At the same time, it wasn't just the betrayal weighing me down. It was the constant stream of messages from everyone else, from Carter, from my parents, even from some of our old mutual friends, all of them asking me to reconsider, all of them telling me it was my fault for breaking the family apart. I couldn't breathe under the weight of their expectations. But I didn't break. I wouldn't. I refused. I needed to see this through, not for them, but for me. I couldn't let their manipulation work anymore. I couldn't go back to being the person who apologized for their mistakes. I was done. I thought I had it under control. I told myself that each step I took away from Simon, away from Marissa, was a victory. That each day I stood firm in my decision, despite the constant pressure, was a reminder of how strong I was. I thought the worst was behind me. But it wasn't. It hit me one night, like a wave that dragged me under and left me gasping for air. I had just finished dinner, the small, quiet routine of cooking and cleaning alone becoming my new normal. I was getting used to the loneliness, used to the silence that now filled every corner of the apartment. Simon's absence felt like a physical ache. I hadn't realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in him until I had to face the emptiness he left behind. It was the first time I had felt completely isolated. The phone rang. I stared at it for a moment before I picked it up. The familiar name, Marissa, flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped, but I didn't hesitate to answer. If I was going to move forward, I had to face this. I had to let her say what she needed to say, no matter how much I dreaded it. Paula, her voice was softer than I expected, not as accusing, but still cold. We need to talk. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to block her, to erase every trace of her from my life, but I didn't. I stayed on the line, telling myself I had to be strong. I had to hear her out. I know you're angry, she continued, but you don't understand. We're all struggling here. Simon, he's losing himself. He can't deal with this, and neither can I. A hollow laugh escaped me. I couldn't stop it. The absurdity of her words hit me like a slap. You're both struggling? I asked, my voice tight. You hurt me, Marissa, and you're worried about Simon? Paula, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it's too late to fix anything now, isn't it? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. She wasn't even asking for forgiveness anymore. She wasn't even pretending to apologize. This was just her trying to make herself feel better, her trying to justify what she'd done to me, to us. You're right, I said, the words cutting like glass. It's too late. She didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. It was almost like she was waiting for me to break, to apologize, to forgive her. But I didn't. I couldn't. I felt a sharp, bitter anger growing inside me, turning cold as it spread through every fiber of my being. She had taken my trust. She had taken my family. And now she was trying to make me feel guilty for it, for my choice, for my refusal to forgive them both. The worst part? I realized that I wasn't angry just because of what they did. I was angry because I couldn't undo it. I couldn't turn back time and unchoose Simon. I couldn't erase the years I had spent trusting him, believing in him. I couldn't take back the love I had given him. And that was the hardest part. The part that felt like it was consuming me. For the first time since it all began, I felt truly alone. Marissa, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know who I am anymore. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I can't do this, I finished. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. I can't pretend that you didn't betray me. I can't pretend that Simon didn't. And I can't keep making excuses for people who don't care enough to even apologize properly. Another long silence passed before she spoke again. This time, her voice was quieter, less sure of herself. I'm sorry, she said, her voice raw, but I think you're making a mistake. I could feel my heart breaking, but this time, I didn't let it swallow me. I wouldn't let it. No, I said, steady now. You don't get to do this to me. You don't get to tell me how to feel anymore. I ended the call before she could say anything else. But the emptiness was still there, the ache, the feeling that something inside me had died, and I couldn't revive it. I walked over to the window and stared out into the dark, empty streets. The city felt like it was miles away, like I was untethered from everything I once knew. That was the dark moment, the point where everything felt like it was slipping away, where I thought I couldn't go any further. The point where I doubted myself for even trying to move forward. But I couldn't stay in that place forever. I couldn't stay in the dark, drowning in self-pity. I needed to find my way out, and I would. But the thought still lingered, like a ghost. Would I ever feel whole again? Would I ever trust someone the way I trusted Simon? Would I ever trust Marissa again? For now, though, all I could do was sit with the pain, and then find a way to heal. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some huge cathartic moment where everything clicked into place, and the clouds parted, and I suddenly felt free. It came slowly, like a wave creeping up a shore, almost unnoticeable, until you realized you were standing in the water, your feet sinking deeper with each passing second. I spent the next few days in a blur. I went to work. I went through the motions. But my mind was elsewhere, on the lies, on the betrayal, on the choices that had led me here. I started avoiding people. I stayed in my apartment, alone, too consumed by the storm inside me to face the world. It wasn't until I saw Lena again that something in me shifted. She'd always been the one person who didn't know about Simon and Marissa. She wasn't involved in the drama, hadn't witnessed the unraveling. She'd been out of the loop, which, in some twisted way, made her the perfect person to talk to. I didn't expect her to come by. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and I certainly hadn't been in the mood to reach out. But one afternoon the doorbell rang, and there she was, standing there, her dark hair in a messy bun, a bottle of wine in her hand. Thought I'd check on you, she said with a soft smile. You've been MIA. I've just been busy, I replied, forcing a smile. I knew it was a lie, but I said it anyway. Lena stepped inside, setting the wine down on the counter. I noticed how she hesitated as she looked around the apartment, at the empty spaces, the stillness. She knew something wasn't right, and she didn't waste time beating around the bush. Paula, she began, her tone gentle but serious. What's really going on? I felt the dam in my chest start to crack. I couldn't lie to her, not anymore. I told her everything. About Simon, about Marissa, about the months of doubt and deceit that had slowly chipped away at me. I didn't hold back. How much I loved Simon, how much I trusted Marissa, and how utterly destroyed I felt when I realized they'd both chosen each other over me. I expected her to comfort me, to tell me everything would be okay, to say something that would make the pain go away. Instead, Lena just listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer any cliches about time healing all wounds. She simply let me speak, letting me empty the weight off my shoulders. When I finished, I wiped my eyes, feeling exhausted. I didn't expect much from her, just some empathy, a shoulder to cry on. But then she said something I wasn't prepared for. "You have to let them go, Paula," Lena said, her voice steady. "Not just Simon, not just Marissa, but your family. You're holding on to something that's never been yours to keep." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd never thought of it that way. I'd always tried to fit myself into their world, their expectations, their rules. I'd done it for so long it felt like I was suffocating under the weight of everyone else's ideas of what I should be. But Lena was right. I had tried so hard to keep them close, to please them, to fix the mess they'd made, and I had lost myself in the process. "You're not responsible for their happiness," Lena continued. "You can't carry that weight anymore. You need to decide what's best for you, not for them. You're not their property to dispose of when it's convenient. You're not the person they can break and rebuild as they see fit." Her words cut through the fog that had been clouding my mind. I had been running on autopilot for so long, trying to fix things, trying to repair something that wasn't mine to fix. I thought of everything I had sacrificed for my family's approval, the years spent pretending I wasn't my own person, the relationships I had tried to force to fit their mold, the trust I gave out, only for it to be shattered when it mattered most. "You're right," I said, the words tasting strange on my tongue. "I've been letting them control me. I've been living for them, not for me." I felt something shift inside me then. It was like a knot that had been tightly wound in my chest was starting to loosen, bit by bit. The anger, the betrayal, it was still there, raw and real. But so was the realization that I didn't have to stay stuck in that place anymore. I didn't have to keep hurting over people who had hurt me. And as much as I loved Simon, as much as I loved Marissa, I was the one who needed to be whole. I needed to rebuild my life, not for them, but for me. Lena reached out and put her hand on mine, her grip warm and solid. "You're going to be okay, Paula. It's going to hurt, and it's going to take time, but you're going to get through it. You're stronger than you realize." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I knew there was no going back. The pain was still fresh, the scars still raw. But this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. I didn't have to be a victim. I didn't have to stay broken. I had me. And that was enough. It wasn't over. Not yet. The aftermath of everything, of Simon, of Marissa, of my family, wasn't something that could be wiped away in a few days. It was a slow, grueling process of untangling the web they'd built around me. But something inside me had shifted. The fire of anger and betrayal was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer consuming me. It was fueling my need to rebuild. The first blow came 2 weeks after Lena's visit. I was at work, scrolling through emails, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Simon and I want to meet with you." I stared at the message, my heart skipping. I didn't need to read the rest of it. I already knew what they were going to say, what Simon would say, the promises, the apologies, the hollow words they thought could fix everything. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I wasn't ready to hear their excuses, their manipulation. They hadn't earned the right to talk to me, not after what they'd done. The next message came a few hours later. It was from Marissa. "You don't understand what's happening, Paula. Please don't shut us out. We're still family." I gripped the phone tightly, so tight my knuckles turned white. I wanted to throw it. I wanted to scream. But instead, I let out a slow breath, reading the message again. What was it they thought they were entitled to? What kind of family treats each other like this? What kind of people could betray their own blood, their own trust, and still believe they had a place in my life? I replied simply, "You're not family anymore, not like this." The silence after sending that message was deafening. The world felt still, like everything had frozen in that one moment. And then it started to unravel. By the time I got home, I found a voicemail from Carter. I didn't have to listen to the whole thing to know what he was saying. It was the same line, the same plea, only this time it was wrapped in guilt. "You're really going to throw this all away, Paula? This is your family, your future. You're making a huge mistake." I deleted it without a second thought. The fallout from their actions hadn't just been emotional. It was affecting everything. My career, my friendships, my life. It wasn't just Simon and Marissa who had lost me. It was everyone they had used as pawns in their game. I heard from people at work who were suddenly distant. I overheard whispers during lunch breaks. People who I had worked with for years suddenly couldn't look me in the eye. The rumors about my family's fallout had spread faster than I could control, and it felt like I was losing more than just Simon and Marissa. I was losing myself in the process. I had always prided myself on being a professional, on maintaining boundaries between my personal and work life. But now it felt like my life had become a spectacle for everyone to judge. They weren't seeing me. They were seeing my last name, my family's business, and all the baggage that came with it. But the real breaking point came when I received an email from Blake's family. They'd known about everything. Of course they had. Everyone knew. But they were different. They weren't part of the mess my family had made. They had their own businesses to deal with, their own legacy to uphold. And yet there they were, reaching out in their own way, guilt-laden. "I know this has been tough on you both," the email began, "but we're concerned. Blake's been distant. We can't help but wonder if your family's drama is affecting his work." It hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't enough that my family had sabotaged my career. Now, Blake's family was insinuating that I was the one to blame for his own troubles? I could feel the rage rising in my chest, hotter and sharper than anything I'd experienced before. But something stopped me from replying right away. I wasn't going to let them drag me into their mess. I forwarded the email to Blake with just a single line, "We need to talk." When he came home later that night, he could tell something was off. The tension was thick between us, a distance that hadn't been there before. We sat down on the couch and I showed him the email. He went silent, his face pale, his hands clenched in his lap, and I could see the internal struggle, the guilt. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice low. "I didn't want you to feel like this was affecting our lives, but I knew my parents would make it about them. They don't understand why this hurts so much." "I don't care what they understand," I said firmly. "I care about us, about me. You and I need to get through this without them dragging us down." Blake didn't argue. He nodded slowly. "I know, but Paula, I can't help but feel like all of this is my fault too. I should have told you sooner. I should have seen what was happening." He was blaming himself, but he didn't need to. This wasn't about him. This was about me. I was the one who had been betrayed, the one who had lost everything, the one who had to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. "No, Blake," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't your fault. It's mine too, but not in the way you think. I let my family control me. I let them have power over my life for so long that I forgot what I wanted. I forgot who I was. This is me finding myself again." Blake's eyes softened, and he reached for my hand. "I'm here. We'll figure this out, okay? No more letting them win." I looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The fallout wasn't just about losing Simon, Marissa, or even my family. It was about standing up for myself, about choosing to stop being someone's pawn and becoming the architect of my own life. But I still had to face the consequences. I still had to live with the fact that my family would never accept me for the person I was becoming. That was something I had to let go. The weeks that followed weren't easy. They weren't filled with immediate answers or the clarity I'd been hoping for. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't running from my decisions anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I was moving forward, and I was doing it for myself. Blake and I settled into a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension. There were still times when the weight of the past crept in, when I heard something about Simon or Marissa from mutual acquaintances, or when I saw one of their names pop up on social media. But I had stopped letting it define me. I stopped being the person who waited for validation from my family. I stopped letting their expectations guide my every move, and I found that the more I distanced myself from the chaos, the more space I had to breathe, to think, and to grow. It took time, but I started to feel whole again. I started to rebuild my trust, my confidence, my life. Blake and I talked more, deeper than we ever had before. I had told him about my family's control, about how much it had shaped me, how much it had hurt me. And he listened. He didn't judge. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. And in that listening, I found the space I needed to heal. As for my family, they were gone, and I had to accept that. I couldn't force them to understand me. I couldn't make them see how their actions had broken me. But I had learned something important in all of this. I didn't need them to approve of my choices anymore. I didn't need their love if it came with strings attached. I didn't need their validation to be who I was meant to be. I moved into my own space. a small, quiet apartment with natural light that flooded in through the windows. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It felt like a fresh start. It felt like freedom. Blake and I talked about buying a small house outside the city, something simple, something that would be ours. I didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a say in it. The lessons I learned were hard fought, but they were the ones I needed. True independence doesn't mean being free from pain or betrayal. It means being free from the need for approval, from the need to please people who will never truly see you. I was finally learning to be my own person, to let go of the past, and to live my life the way I wanted, not the way I was expected to. Sometimes I still think about my family, about my parents and Carter and the empty seat at the table. I wonder if they'll ever see me for who I am. But I also know that I can't spend my life waiting for that. I have my own story now, and it's mine to write.